Hey everyone, I go by V Lauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome back to another episode of Witness to Glory. It's been a while since I did another episode. In the last episode, I talked about the greatest work of a church photographer. But I want to actually start getting into the actual work that we do as church photographers. I was glad when they said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." But before we go, first we have to plan. And there's a level of planning that goes into church photography. And that planning starts in the place where you call home. Now remember, in episode 4 of this series, but if you haven't watched the episode, I encourage you to go back and watch. I talked about that the number one rule of church photography is to seek to live a lifestyle that is pleasing and acceptable to God. It's important that we understand and establish the foundation that it's not just what we do on Sundays that matters, but it's our whole entire week. Obviously, that is done away from the physical sanctuary. That is done at home. While we are at home, it's also the opportunity for us to not just spiritually prepare for entrance into the church, but also, it's important for us to physically prepare for our entrance in the church. And part of that preparation starts with planning out our approach as church photographers. And for me, as a photographer in general, a key to my approach is intentionality. I'm not going to get too deep into intentionality because you have like the philosophical definition, you have like the psychological definition. I'm not going to get that deep into it. But intentionality is simply the fact or quality of being done on purpose or with intent, and an attitude of purposefulness with a commitment to deliberate action. So intentionality is your skill in defining your goals. It encourages you to think about, why do you do what you do? And it leads us to ask questions such as, what do I want to achieve with my efforts? So establishing this leads us to what is called intentional photography. Intentionality is grounded in your realities. And as photographers, our view of reality is very important in how we document what we are witnessing. It's not only how we see things, but also what they mean to us, because we tend to take photos of things that mean something to us. Our perception is also based upon what you know, because what you know eventually shapes the outcome of your photos. Now, obviously, there are coincidences or, moments that happen where it's like you didn't intend for the photo to come out in a certain way, and then it does and it works. But the thing is, for the most part, those are kind of like flukes. You want to make sure that you have full control of your camera and that you know what you're doing at all times. So in terms of your skill as a photographer, you can only go off what you know. And I believe that experience is the culmination of failing and learning from your failures. It helps you to become a better photographer. Fumbling a shot teaches you what you need to do to make sure you actually execute the shot the next time. The problem is though, this is the reason why you want to make sure that you know what you're doing as a photographer, because some moments you can never get again. You can never capture. It was that one shot that you had to get it. And so there could be a lot of factors, even that professionals experience, where it's like factors outside of their control that lead them to missing the shot. But the thing is, never let it be something that you functionally don't know how to do with your camera, and that's the reason why you miss a shot. It can be a process of trial and error, but there are some basic things that you should know as a photographer. The exposure triangle. That is something that you need to know as a photographer. And the thing is, there's so many resources about the exposure triangle that I'm not going to belabor this point, because I presume that many of the people watching understand or know about these things. So it's making sure that you know shutter speed is, you know what ISO is, you know what aperture is. These are 3 important things help you to properly expose your photos. I am not seeking to have perfect exposure. I know, right? It might sound crazy, but hear me out. My goal is to get workable exposure. Expose my photos in the way that I can work with. I shoot raw and I edit all of my photos. So I'm shooting according to my style and what works for me. You have to do what works for you. right? Don't let any other photographer try to belittle you based upon your workflow. Whatever works for you so that you can be efficient and deliver the results in a timely manner. Now, obviously for church photography, churches don't have the best lighting. Generally speaking, it's not ideal lighting. I can either underexpose or overexpose my photo. Sometimes I even nail or hit the perfect exposure. But the reason being, I like exposure that I can work with in post, knowing the basics of photography and knowing how to use your camera. That's a part of intentional photography. But beyond that, understanding what you are going to be photographing, because then it helps you to understand what kind of shots I can anticipate getting. When it comes to church photography, you could be photographing a Sunday service or a weekly Bible study, prayer night. Some churches do revival, some churches do a conference, a Christian concert, give back, give away. A lot of events can happen at church. Some churches may give you shot lists, but in a lot of the spaces that I've worked in, I've been given creative liberties to document how I please. And I love that, praise the Lord, okay? A shot list is a series of photos that you refer to while photographing a scene. It's essentially your strategy for how you're gonna document the service. For most of us, we are taking photos on Sundays. And so think about a Sunday service, how it is organized or scheduled. Some Sunday services actually work like productions, especially if they're live streaming the services. So there's a certain way that things are ordered, especially if they know they have an online viewership. That may work differently than churches who don't live stream their services. So keep that in mind. So there may be a little more flexibility for the services that don't live stream juxtaposed to the ones that do. Keeping that in mind, you can visualize what type of shots do I need to get throughout the service. So here are some ideas of what you can put on your shot list. Person kneeling, their hands raised or clasped together like praying hands, lifting their arms or arms outstretched, holding hands, reading the Bible, paperback or digital, hugging, or more broader examples could be worship team, band, preacher, announcement/scripture reading, greeting time, greeters/ushers, altar call, prayer, young people, kids. Shot lists can even get more specific based upon shot types. Now, I'm not going to get too detailed in that. I do have an upcoming episode where I'm going to talk about those things. We're going to get a little more specific. But the thing is, this just gives you a general idea of what you can document, and it helps your mind to mentally organize these thoughts and ideas of how you can photograph and document the church. Because sometimes, depending on how big the sanctuary is and how large of the gathering, it could be overwhelming. And so this helps, I think, to provide some direction for the overstimulation that could result. When people tell you to devise a shot list, they kind of stop there in terms of like, okay, you need to get this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot. Think about how this photo could be used later on, especially if your church has a live stream service, and then on top of that, they're active and engaged on social media. So what's important to understand is that not all of your photos are photos. In this hyper digital era, a lot of the photos that you take becomes content. The sort of difference between like content and photos is that, I don't want to use this analogy to say like not all Christians are Catholic, but all Catholics are Christian, right? My background is in communication. I got my degrees in communication. Social media is a tool for communication to reach a mass audience. You publish information, you broadcast information for people to receive, and so that they can ultimately do something. And marketing is the means that you can do that, to lead people to act, to do something. That's why you have social media campaigns, is to get people to rally around something in order to do something. There's a certain end goal with content that doesn't exist for photo. So you take a photo, maybe for your own satisfaction, for your own gratification. Maybe the photo sits on your SD cards, maybe it sits on your hard drive, maybe you print it and it goes up on a wall. That's as far as the extent of photos can go, but you can then take those photos and use it for content marketing. Now, specifically, your photos could be used for YouTube thumbnails, TikTok covers, Instagram stories, Facebook banners, the church's website, just to name a few. Each of these platforms have different ratios, sizes, and dimensions. And so these are the things that you will have to take into account as you are photographing particular moments in churches. As you're thinking about what I'm going to be photographing and how these photos can ultimately be used, you have to consider your gear. So what type of lenses would be fitting for what I'm documenting? Because some lenses might not be suitable for the shots that you're seeking to get. So it's generally recommended that church photographers use a zoom lens, preferably a 70-200, which is a big old telephoto lens. For me, the 70-200 is a go-to lens, kind of up until like the motor started dying in it. But I've also used the 85. The 85 is a prime lens. It is a telephoto lens. There are plenty of telephoto prime lenses that you can use, but it's often recommended to use a zoom lens, because with the zoom lens, you don't have to zoom with your feet as you would a prime lens. You would just actually zoom with the lens and not have to move around as much. It's because the goal is not to be a distraction. Now, the thing is, I have used a 16-35, I use a 24-70, I use the 50, an 85, a 70-200. So I've used a variety of lenses in church spaces. Now, it was all predicated upon the shot. So when you're thinking and composing your shot list, also think about what type of lenses will help me to achieve these certain shots. But the important thing is that you have a vision for how you are going to document the church. So altogether, you gotta understand the basics of your camera. Okay, I don't know what camera you're using, but know how to operate your camera is important to being an intentional photographer. Secondly, is to understand what you are photographing and how those images are going to be used. Then you can devise your shot list. And from there, you actually have a written strategy of how you're going to document the church. But then with that, you also need to understand what type of gear you're going to need to successfully capture those shots. So I think all of these things helps us to prepare to do the actual work of a church photographer so that we can confidently say, let us go into the house of the Lord and be intentional witnesses to glory.